It's not random. When a crisis begins, people don't scatter evenly across every store. They move in patterns, predictable ones. And the first store that gets emptied isn't always the biggest or the most important. It's the one people trust the most for immediate needs. That's the key. Because in the early moments of uncertainty, people don't think long-term. They think fast. They ask one question: what do I need right now? And the answer to that question sends them all to the same place. At the same time. That's what creates the first wave. Not panic. Convergence. Now here's what most people misunderstand. Shortages don't start when supply runs out. They start when attention focuses. Once attention locks onto a location, demand spikes instantly. And no system is built to handle that kind of sudden pressure. So shelves don't empty slowly. They collapse in hours. Now think about behavior. People don't go to multiple places first. They go to the most familiar one. The one closest to routine. The place they already trust for daily needs. Because under pressure, people default to habit. They don't explore new options. They repeat old ones. That's why the same type of store gets hit first in almost every situation. Not because it has the best supply, but because it has the most attention. Now here's where the advantage comes in. If you understand which store that is, you understand where the crowd will go. And more importantly, where it won't go immediately. Because while one location gets overwhelmed, others remain open, quiet, accessible, at least for a short time. That gap is everything. Because timing, not just resources, decides who stays ahead. And the people who recognize the pattern early never enter the first wave. They move around it. While everyone else is rushing into the same place, they're already somewhere else, finishing what they need before pressure builds. Because once that first store empties, the wave doesn't stop. It spreads. And by then, you're either ahead of it or stuck inside it. The first store that gets emptied is the grocery store. Not because it has the most important supplies, but because it has the most habit. It's where people already go multiple times a week. It's familiar. It's trusted. And when uncertainty hits, people don't think strategically, they default to what they know. So the moment something feels wrong, they go there. Now here's what makes this dangerous. Everyone has the same idea at the same time. That creates instant pressure. Parking lots fill. Lines form. Shelves start clearing faster than they can be restocked. And within hours, not days, key sections disappear. Water goes first. Then bread, milk, and basic food items. Then anything that looks remotely essential. It happens fast because grocery stores operate on steady demand, not surge demand. They are designed for flow, not for spikes. So when thousands of people suddenly shift behavior, the system breaks. Now here's the deeper issue. People don't just go once. They go repeatedly. They come back for things they forgot. They bring family members. They stock more than they need just in case. That multiplies the demand. Now the shelves don't just empty, they stay empty. Because restocking can't keep up with panic buying patterns. Now here's where most people make the mistake. They wait. They think, I'll go later when it calms down. But it doesn't calm down. It escalates. Because once shelves start looking empty, more people rush in. Scarcity triggers urgency. And urgency spreads faster than logic. Now here's the key insight. The grocery store is not just the first place to empty. It's the trigger point. Once it empties, everything else follows. Because people realize something is wrong. And that realization pushes them into other stores. Fuel stations. Hardware stores. Pharmacies. The wave expands. But it always starts in the same place. Now here's the advantage. If you understand that the grocery store is ground zero, you don't enter it late. You either go early or not at all. Because once the crowd arrives, you're not shopping anymore. You're competing. And in that environment, you're already behind. After the grocery store empties, the pressure shifts. And it moves fast. The next place people rush to is the fuel station. Because once food and water start disappearing, people realize something bigger might be happening. And that triggers the next instinct. Mobility. the ability to leave, to relocate, to stay in control. Fuel represents that control. So demand spikes instantly. Lines begin forming within hours. Not gradually, immediately. Cars wrap around blocks. People start filling not just their tanks, but extra containers. And just like the grocery store, fuel systems are not built for sudden surges. They rely on steady supply and predictable demand. When that balance breaks, shortages appear quickly. Now here's what most people don't realize. Fuel availability doesn't just depend on the station. It depends on delivery. And delivery depends on infrastructure. If supply trucks slow down or routes are disrupted, stations can't refill fast enough. So once local reserves are gone, they stay empty. Now here's the second layer. Panic behavior makes it worse. People don't just fill what they need. They overfill. They top off repeatedly. They store more than usual. That drains supply even faster. Now here's where the mistake happens. People wait until they see the lines. Then they decide to go. But by that point, the system is already under stress. What should have taken minutes now takes hours. And in some cases, nothing is left by the time they arrive. Now here's the key insight. Fuel isn't just about driving. It supports everything. Power generation, charging devices, emergency movement. Without it, your options shrink fast. Now understand the pattern. First comes food panic. Then comes movement panic. And movement panic is more chaotic because it involves urgency, fear, and limited supply all at once. That combination creates pressure quickly. Now here's the advantage. If you recognize this sequence early, you don't wait for empty shelves to confirm it. You act before the shift happens. Because once people move from groceries to fuel, the window is already closing. And after fuel, the wave doesn't slow down. It spreads wider, faster, into every other store that supports survival. After fuel stations get hit, the next wave moves somewhere less obvious, but just as critical. Pharmacies. Because once people secure food and fuel, reality starts to settle in. This might last longer than expected. And that thought changes priorities fast. Now health becomes the focus. People start thinking about pain relief, fever, infection, existing medical needs. And suddenly, demand spikes in a completely different category. Now here's what makes this stage dangerous. Pharmacies don't hold large surplus inventory. They're designed for steady, predictable demand, not sudden surges. So when hundreds of people arrive with the same concerns, shelves clear quickly. Painkillers go first. Basic medications disappear. First aid supplies follow right after. And unlike food, these items are harder to substitute. If they're gone, they're gone. Now here's the second layer. Prescription dependency. Many people rely on regular medication. When they feel uncertainty, they try to secure extra supply. That increases demand even more. And systems that control distribution don't always allow rapid adjustments. So even if the supply exists somewhere, access becomes limited. Now here's where most people fall behind. They don't think about medical needs early. They assume they can handle it later. But later is exactly when availability drops. Because this phase doesn't start immediately. It starts after the first wave. Which means by the time people realize it, they're already late. Now here's the key insight. Health issues don't wait for stable conditions. They continue, and often increase, under stress. Minor problems become more frequent. And without basic supplies, they escalate. That's where risk grows. Now understand the pattern. First food, then fuel, then health. Each step follows awareness. As people understand more about the situation, their behavior shifts, but each shift comes with a delay. And that delay is what creates opportunity. Because while one store is overwhelmed, another is still quiet for a short time. And the people who move during that window avoid the next wave completely. After pharmacies, the wave moves again. This time, it shifts toward hardware stores. Because once people secure food, fuel, and basic health supplies, they start thinking about staying. Not just surviving the moment, but managing the environment around them. That's when a different type of demand appears. People begin looking for light sources, batteries, tools, materials to fix, block, or adjust their space. And hardware stores become the next target. Now here's what makes this stage unique. It's not driven by immediate need. It's driven by realization. People start asking, what if this lasts longer? What if I need to fix something? What if I lose power completely? That shift in thinking creates a second wave of urgency. But unlike grocery stores, hardware stores are less crowded early on. They stay calm, at first. That's the window. Because once awareness spreads, they fill up quickly. And certain sections disappear fast. Batteries, flashlights, extension cords, basic tools. Not because they're rare, but because everyone suddenly sees their importance at the same time. Now here's the deeper issue. These items are not consumed like food. They are enabling tools. They allow you to adapt. Without them, you're limited to what already exists. With them, you can adjust your environment, fix problems, create solutions, maintain control. That's the difference. Now here's where most people fall behind. They don't think about hardware early. It doesn't feel urgent, so they delay. But once the realization hits, demand spikes instantly. And just like every other stage, the system can't keep up. Now here's the key insight. Each wave is triggered by awareness, not by supply alone. People don't move until something becomes obvious to them. And by the time it's obvious, it's already late. Now understand the pattern so far. Grocery stores start the wave. Fuel stations amplify it. Pharmacies follow. Hardware stores expand it. And the wave isn't done yet, because the next stage moves into something even more overlooked. Something people ignore until they absolutely need it. After hardware stores, the wave shifts again, this time into places most people ignore at the beginning. General retail stores. Large, mixed-item stores. The kind that carry a bit of everything. Clothing, household goods, storage items, hygiene products. These don't feel urgent early on, so they stay calm while everything else gets overwhelmed. But that calm doesn't last. Because once people settle into the reality of disruption, a new layer of needs appears. Not survival in the immediate sense, but sustainability. Now people start thinking about clean clothing, storage containers, sanitation supplies, daily use items they ran out of, things they didn't prioritize in the first rush. And that delayed demand hits all at once. Now here's what makes this stage different. It's quieter, but still critical. There's less panic, but more urgency. People are no longer reacting blindly. They're correcting mistakes. They realize what they forgot. And they rush to fix it. That's what empties these stores. Not fear, but realization. Now here's the deeper issue. These stores hold items that are hard to replace once they're gone. Not because they're rare, but because they're overlooked early. And once supply chains slow down, restocking becomes unpredictable. So even though they don't empty first, they become difficult to rely on later. Now here's where most people fall behind. They assume they can come back for these items later, after things settle. But things don't settle quickly. And by the time they return, selection is limited. Options are gone. Now they're forced to adapt with less. Now here's the key insight. Every stage of the wave reveals something people didn't think about earlier. And each time that happens, demand spikes in a new location. That's the pattern. Now look at the full flow. Grocery stores trigger it. Fuel stations accelerate it. Pharmacies and hardware stores expand it. General retail stores absorb the leftovers of missed preparation. Each step comes with less availability and more pressure. And by the end, there are no easy options left. Only whatever remains. It always follows a pattern. Not because people plan it, but because human behavior is predictable under pressure. The first store that gets emptied is the grocery store. Not because it's the most critical in the long term, but because it's the most familiar in the moment. That's where people go first. Out of habit, out of urgency, out of instinct. And that single decision triggers everything else. Because once grocery shelves start emptying, it sends a signal. Something is wrong. That signal spreads faster than the actual problem. And that's when the wave begins. From there it moves. Fuel stations come next. Because people shift from survival to mobility. They want options. They want escape routes. They want control over where they can go. So fuel demand spikes. Lines form. Supply drops. And now movement becomes limited. Then the focus shifts again. Pharmacies. Health becomes the concern. People think about illness, injury, existing conditions. They try to secure what they can before access becomes restricted. And just like before, demand outpaces supply. Then comes the expansion phase. Hardware stores. People move from immediate survival to environment control. They want light, tools, backup systems, ways to fix problems instead of just reacting to them. That's when these stores fill up, quietly at first, then all at once. After that, general retail stores. The overlooked category. The place people go to fix what they missed. Hygiene, storage, daily use items. Things that didn't feel urgent at the beginning, but become critical over time. And by this stage, the pattern is clear. Each wave is not random. It's a response to realization. People don't act all at once. They act in stages. And each stage comes later than it should. That delay is what creates shortages. Not lack of supply alone, but synchronized demand. Now here's the most important part. The advantage doesn't come from reacting faster inside the wave. It comes from avoiding the wave completely. Because once you're inside it, you're competing. Limited options. Increased pressure. Reduced control. But if you understand the sequence, you can move ahead of it. You don't wait for grocery shelves to empty. You don't wait for fuel lines to form. You don't wait for pharmacies to get crowded. You act before those signals become obvious. Because once something becomes obvious, everyone sees it. And when everyone sees it, it's already too late to move easily. Now understand this. Preparation is not about predicting the exact crisis. It's about recognizing patterns that repeat in every crisis. Where people go first, what they prioritize, what they ignore, and most importantly, when they realize they were wrong. Because that moment of realization is when demand spikes the hardest. That's when stores empty fastest. And that's where most people fall behind. So the real takeaway is simple. Don't follow attention. Move before attention shifts. Because the first store that gets emptied is just the beginning. And once that first wave starts, everything else happens faster than people expect.